What is going on, everybody? Steel Orange coming back at you today with the final video in our Intro to Conquest series. This is going to be my guide on how to play the ADC role, or you might call it the Hunter role, or the carry role, or the attack damage carry role. There's a lot of names for it, but it's the role where you pick a Hunter and you go to do a lane and do a lot of damage. So we're going to talk about that role today. First, I'm going to talk about the openings a little bit, like what you're going to buy and where you're going to start. Then I'm going to talk about the laning phase, and like always with all the other videos I've done in this series, we're then going to go back to the God screen, and I'm going to go through the different Hunters and kind of classify them into their different roles, and we'll talk about the team fighting phase as a Hunter a little bit. So, Hunters have one of the more undefined starting openings, I guess. Like, there are a lot of different ways you can start with a Hunter. So one common start, and this depends on the Hunter that you're playing basically and the matchup that you have. One common start is to buy Death's Toll and Boots 1, and then you can buy health and mana potions, and usually you're going to buy beads. There are a few situations where you win it, but most of the time you're going to buy beads. Another option is for some characters, maybe you buy Bluestone instead of Death's Toll, and then instead of buying boots with sometimes with Death's Toll, you can buy tier 1 of Ichival, so this short bow right here, you can buy that as well. And the last common start is, instead of any of this stuff, is to buy tier 2 of Transcendence. But I'm not going to do that because I want to move fast, so I'm going to sell all this stuff and buy boots. Okay, don't start with Ninja Tabby, that would be bad. So yeah, and then to start the game, you're going to head out of the base, and you're going to run over to red buff, similar to the support and the mid laners. You're going to start at the red buff, which is right there. Right over there. You're going to start this camp with your support and your mid laner, with the exception of a couple Hunters. There are two Hunters. Huyi and Rom can sometimes start with these back camps if they want, because they have really good level 1 clear. Aside from them, for the most part, you're going to start with this red buff. The three of you are going to clear it as fast as you can. I'm not actually going to clear it all the way, but normally you would. And the mid laner is going to pick up that buff and then go to mid lane. Then you're going to come over here with your support. You're going to pull these boars over to the corner like this, and then you're going to send them back to let your support tank the damage, and you're going to kill those as fast as you can. Then you're going to run over here to lane. I kind of talked about this in my support video as well, but at this point, depending on who gets to the lane first and what the matchup is, who has a more aggressive matchup, you may get lane pressure. You may be able to clear before them and then be aggressive in lane, or you may lose lane pressure and have to be defensive. The key thing with a Hunter in the laning phase is basically to just get as fed as possible. You want to get as much experience and gold as you possibly can, so that you can get your build online as quickly as possible, get your level up as high as possible, so that you can start doing a lot of damage. Because as a Hunter, that is your role, is to just sit in the back of a fight and do as much damage as you can. Obviously, a great way to get fed is to get kills in lane, but it's even more important to not die in lane. So if the opportunity for you to get kills is there, if you're playing a character that's very aggressive early, or is very good early and you can be aggressive with them, then sure, go for those kills. Get them if you can, but you want to be careful about your positioning. Make sure that if you're being really aggressive in lane, that you have wards in the jungle so that you know if you're going to get ganked. And if you don't have the more aggressive composition, don't be afraid to be a little more passive, hide under tower in a sense, with your support, and just keep clearing waves and getting your farm up, and just avoiding dying. Because that's really the big thing with Hunters, is just to not get set back. You just want to make sure that you keep up with your farm, with your gold intake, and then you're going to be fine. You just want to get to the late game. So around the 4 minutes 30 seconds mark rather, your support and the other team support are going to leave the lane, and they're going to head over to mid lane. And so then you're essentially going to have like a second solo lane where it's just you and the other team's Hunter, and sort of your own solo lane. And you guys might have other players on your team come over and gank from time to time. Some other people might come into the lane every once in a while, but for the most part, it's just you and the other Hunter in this lane. And so again, it's kind of the same concept, but just in a one-on-one setting this time, where you want to get fed, you want to get as much farm as you possibly can, get kills if you can, but especially focus on not dying, because you want to make sure that you don't get set back. As long as you can survive to the late game, then you're going to be able to fulfill your role in team fights as a Hunter, which is to just do a lot of damage. So yeah, that's basically it about the laning phase. So we're going to go back to the god screen now. We're going to talk about team fighting phase. So before I talk about the individual gods, I want to talk about the team fight phase in general, as a Hunter. So what Hunters are good at is doing a lot of damage with their auto attacks, or basic attacks, or some people just call them autos. But the way you're going to do that is, one, by building in a way that's going to give you a lot of auto attack damage. I'm not going to go over the late game builds for hunters because there's a lot of different ones. And that would be a really long, complex video that would take like an hour and a half to go over the builds, all the different possible late game builds for all the different hunters. So I'm not going to do that, but just suffice to say that you want to, once you start to understand builds a little better, you want to be building hunters in a sense that they're going to do a lot of damage with their auto attacks. And so what that means is the style that you're going to play as a hunter in the late game, in the team fight stage, is similar to a mage in that you are a high damage dealer and you're very squishy. So you're going to be sitting at the very back of the team fight behind your tanky frontliners and just do as much damage as you can from a safe distance. The difference is that most of your damage is going to be coming from auto attacks as opposed to abilities like mages. But that's not to say that your abilities don't do a lot of damage. There are some hunters that have pretty high damaging abilities, so you want to definitely use those to their best effect as well. So what I'm going to go through now is I'm going to go through the different hunters and I'm going to put them into 3 different categories based on sort of their strengths and weaknesses and the style that they generally play in the team fight phase. Or sort of throughout the game, how they transition from the laning phase into the team fight phase based on the kind of hunter that they are. So yeah, the first category that I'm going to talk about are the ability-based hunters. So I know I just talked about that hunters are very auto-attack based. They do a lot of damage with their auto-attacks. And this is still true for the ability-based hunters. But what's going to be special about them is that they have a lot of early pressure usually with their abilities. And they have abilities that do a lot of damage by themselves as opposed to abilities that augment their basic attacks. So that's going to be one category. Another category is going to be the hard carries. These are characters whose abilities are more geared toward making their basic attacks even stronger. And so they can just dish out insane amounts of damage with their basic attacks late game because they have some sort of, usually it's like an attack speed stim or something that just makes their auto attacks even stronger in the late game. And so when you get that high damage on your auto attacks and you're also shooting really, really fast because of your abilities that make those auto attacks better, then they're just going to be really, really powerful in the late game. And then the third category that we're going to talk about is the defensive hunters. And basically, these are still hunters that may do a lot of damage with their abilities and sure do a lot of damage with their auto attacks. But one thing that sets them apart is that they're extremely difficult to kill. And so that gives them an advantage because in team fights, they can stay alive longer. And the longer you stay alive, the more auto attacks you can use and the more damage you can do in like a prolonged team fight. So first category is ability-based hunters. And one of the strongest ability-based hunters right now is Anhur. Anhur has one of his best abilities is his Impale. It's a knockback and a stun that does a lot of damage and sets up his other abilities. His ultimate also does a lot of damage. And so Anhur can be very, very aggressive in the early game with these abilities and kind of get those kills in lane that I talked about a little bit. And this can help him snowball the game or get really, really ahead. And then when he gets to the late game, his autos are going to do a lot of damage. He doesn't have any abilities that make him auto attack faster or anything, but usually he's going to be ahead of the rest of the team, so he's going to do just more damage with each auto attack that he uses. The next ability-based hunter is going to be Cupid. Cupid has 2 abilities. His 1, which does an insane amount of damage and also scales really, really well with physical power. And his ultimate, which also does a lot of damage and scales really well, that, again, give him a lot of pressure in the early game and especially gives him a high potential to get early kills. So the same kind of thing as Anhur. You want to be looking for those early kills with Cupid. Again, you don't want to be so aggressive that you get out of position and die, but the potential to get kills early with Cupid is definitely there, and you can stumble the game with him. The next one is Hu Yi. Hu Yi's gone through some changes lately, but he's still very much an ability-based hunter and one of the strongest ability-based hunters in the game, in my opinion. They changed his mark, his second ability up a little bit, so it doesn't have the penetration that it did before. And they also changed the scaling on his ricochet a little bit. But it still remains that his ricochet does a lot of damage when you bounce it off of walls, even if you don't bounce it. And his auto attacks hit really hard when his mark is on somebody. But basically, the thing about Hu Yi is he has a lot of crowd control, a lot of mobility, and a lot of damage with his 1 and his ultimate, and also his auto attacks, obviously, because he's a hunter. So he can also be pretty aggressive early in the early game, and even in the late game with his abilities. If somebody gets caught out of position, he has a lot of ability to lock them down with his abilities and just put a lot of burst damage on them, and then he can finish them up with some auto attacks if he has to. I'm going to leave Izanami for later. Anyway, Medusa. Medusa is definitely an ability-based hunter. Her 2 does a lot of damage. It also is sort of an AoE cone ability if you bounce it off correctly. And then her ultimate obviously is a huge AoE ultimate that stuns multiple members of the team if you can get them grouped up right. Does a lot of damage. So these are really strong abilities. It gives her, again, good pressure in the early game in lane. She can get some kills if people get caught out of position. She also has that ultimate, which can be a great team fight ability that can do a lot of damage and set up the rest of your team for a lot of damage on multiple members of the enemy team. She does have a auto attack stim, which is her 1. But I kind of put air quotes around that because it's an attack speed buff, but only for 3 auto attacks. So it's a really short buff. So if you stun somebody with your ultimate and then use that, you can dish out a lot of burst damage, but it's not really the kind of sustained auto attack damage that you would expect from like a hard carry character. So that's why Medusa doesn't go in that hard carry category, but she's an ability based hunter. Okay, Neith. Neith is kind of the poster child for ability based hunters. She has 4 damaging abilities. Her 1 is a line attack that does an insane amount of damage. Her 2 does damage and heals her. Her 3 is really a mobility ability, but it does do some damage. And her ultimate is a global ultimate that stuns and does a lot of damage too. So she just has a ton of damage in her abilities, and she doesn't have any auto attack stim. So it's really important for Neith to hit her abilities to make sure that you get the maximum amount of damage put out. But again, because she has that high ability damage and that high base damage on her abilities, she can be really good at early in lane, get those early kills. Oh, Ullr. Actually, we'll do Skadi too. Skadi's an ability-based hunter. Again, she has 4 damaging abilities, kind of. And also this pet that does like more damage than she does and is probably strong enough to be its own character, which is kind of annoying. But anyway, Skadi does a lot of damage pretty early in lane. Again, she can get those early kills. She's very good at 1v1ing. So once you get to that stage that I talked about where the supports kind of leave the lane and it's just you and the other hunter, Skadi can definitely fight the other hunter if she is at least even with them, if not ahead of them, and get kills all the time. Another thing that Skadi does is she's a split pusher. So basically she has this pet, her dog, Kaldir, that can tank up to 5 shots from the tower, which is a long time when you get to late game and you're dishing out that auto attack damage really quickly. So you got to keep an eye on Skadi in the late game because she's very immobile, so she's very easy to lock down in team fights. So instead of team fighting, she'll just run away from the team fight and go to a tower and just kill that and then kill another tower and then kill your Phoenix, and all of a sudden your Titan's under attack at 15 minutes and you're like, what just happened? I thought we won the team fight. So don't forget about where Skadi is on the map, and if she starts split pushing, make sure that you have wards up to defend against that. The last one is Ullr. Ullr has 4 damaging abilities and also kind of a lifesteal sim, but Ullr has this great combo of abilities where he has a stun into a line ability into this ground target ability that do an insane amount of burst damage, and this is really how Ullr sets up most of his kills. So definitely a ability-based god, and again, he can get those early kills in lane. If you hit those abilities in the right order and you're good at hitting those, you can be aggressive. Alright, so that's it for the ability-based hunters. Now we're going to go to the hard carries. So the hard carries, again, usually are gods that have some sort of auto-attack stim or auto-attack buff that just makes their auto-attacks, which are already good in the late game, even better, and just makes them, if they get really fed or they get ahead or they can reach late game, a good player with one of these characters can almost win the game by themselves once you get to late game. So, before I get to the hunters, and because I want to forget them, there's 2 mages that are played like hunters, and they both fit into this category. So I want to cover actually 3 mages, I should say. I want to cover these before I go to the hunters, just so I don't forget. So the first one is Freya. Freya is the hardest carry and the highest damaging, auto attack damaging character in the late game, in my opinion. If a Freya gets to late game and the Freya is not stupid or has their eyes closed or is a 4-year-old child, then you're probably going to lose because Freya presses 2 and then holds right trigger and your entire team dies. So Freya does a stupid amount of damage in the late game, and you definitely want to watch out for her. Her laning phase sucks. She has terrible clear. She can't fight in the early game, but once she gets past like 15 or 20 minutes, she starts becoming very viable, and once she gets like 25 or 30 minutes, just don't even try to fight her because you're just going to die. So yeah, that's Freya. The next one is Kronos. Did I go past him? Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, he's right there. He's next to Freya. Kronos, kind of the same thing. Kronos is 2. Not only gives him an increased attack speed buff, but it also increases, depending on where the timer is when you use his 2, it can give you various different buffs, such as power or mana reduction or things like that. And it also increases his movement speed and takes away the auto attack penalty. So these are a bunch of things that just make him an auto attacking monster when he activates this ability, and it lasts for like 5 seconds or 6 seconds or something ridiculous like that. 7 seconds, yeah. So it's this really long-lasting ability that makes his auto attacks hit harder, move faster, and he's like really, really fast too and can stick to you for days. So Kronos is kind of the same thing. If he gets to late game and the character is good, or the player that's using the character is good, you're not going to have a fun time playing against him. And the last one is Sol. Sol is a hard carry for sort of a different reason. She doesn't have any inherent abilities that increase her attack speed or make her attack speed better. It's actually her passive ability that does this. And so what her passive does is when she gains heat from using abilities, her heat increases, or just by hitting auto attacks, her heat increases. When she gets to maximum heat, she gets a attack speed buff. Or I'm sorry, not an attack speed buff. Wait, maybe it is. Oh, I'm not looking at the right thing. Yeah, okay. She gets a magical power buff, an attack speed buff, and a plus 25% damage buff on her auto attacks when she gets to max heat. So these are a bunch of things that obviously are going to make her auto attacks hit really, really hard when she gets to maximum heat. And so when you get to late game, 1, your auto attacks are just going to hit harder because of the items you have, and 2, it's much easier to get to maximum heat because your abilities are leveled up so they increase your heat more quickly. And so you can get to maximum heat basically within like a second or something and then just start dishing out massive amounts of damage. Okay, so now to the hunter, the actual hunters that are hard carries. Artemis is one of the big ones. When Artemis gets to late game, she has this ability, her 2, which gives her up to an 80% attack speed bonus. And she has a passive that increases her crit chance. So she's going to do a ton of damage with auto attacks in the late game. The downside with Artemis is that she's very immobile. So you definitely, if you get caught out of position, you kind of have no choice but to fight. But sometimes when you get to late game with Artemis, it doesn't even matter because you do so much damage that you can just fight the whole world and win. Next one is Rom. Oops, I went up again. Rom. So Rom, same thing. He has an ability. It's also his 2 that gives him an attack speed buff. He also has a 1 that makes his auto attacks do bonus damage and slow the opponent so that you can hit them more easily. And his 3 also gives him a cripple on his next auto attack and gives that auto attack bonus damage. So Rom's entire kit basically is revolved around augmenting the power of his auto attacks. And so when he gets to late game and his auto attacks are the most powerful, he's going to decimate the other team. One of the hardest carries in the game for sure. Kind of on the same level as Freya almost. Xbalanque. Xbalanque doesn't have an attack speed buff like most of the other hard carries does, or most of the other hard carries do, but he has an auto attack damage boost. So even though he's not going to attack faster, his autos are going to hit so much harder than everybody else's that he also kind of qualifies for this hard carry role. Amu's and Cobb. I wasn't sure whether to put Amu's and Cobb in the ability-based or the hard carry category. He is a very ability-based character, at least in lane. The problem is that his laning phase sucks, so I don't really want to categorize his character based on a part of his game that really isn't any good anyway. So in the late game, he's a hard carry, but he kind of hard carries with his abilities in the sense that his abilities just do really, really high amounts of damage. But he also has his 1, which is a hive that he can put on the ground, and then in a radius around that, he has his attack speed increased. So it's sort of like a passive attack speed increase. But I gave Sol the same category for passive attack speed increase, so I'm going to put Amu's and Cobb in the same category where, again, you just want to get to late game with them, and then you're just going to do a lot of damage. Again, he's very immobile, so kind of like Artemis, if he gets caught out of position, he kind of just has to fight. He doesn't really have any other options, but he does so much damage that sometimes you can get away with it. So yeah, that's it for hard carries. And then the last category that I'm going to talk about is the defensive hunters. So again, I said these are the hunters that they do a lot of damage in similar ways that the other categories do, but what makes them stand out is that they are so difficult to kill that they can stay alive for much longer in teamfights and in much more difficult situations than other hunters can, and so you just can't ever get rid of them, and they just keep doing damage forever and ever and ever because you can never kill them. So the first one is Apollo. Apollo is hard to kill for a couple reasons. One of his abilities is an AoE Mesmerize. So if you try to like dive on top of him, he's just gonna mesmerize you, and then that's his 2 rather is a mesmerize, and then he can just dash away from you. So it's a really good disengage move, so that he can't be one shot by like a really powerful character like an assassin or something trying to dive him in the back line. Another great thing is that his ultimate is this global ultimate that takes him up into the sky and away from the field of battle. So if he's ever caught out of position, as long as he can get off, as long as he has about a second and a half to just get off the ground, he's good. He can fly anywhere on the map and he's out of danger. So it's really hard to kill. Next one is Chiron. Chiron has this really, really long dash that knocks everybody away from him, so it's really hard to kill him for that reason. And the other reason is that his ultimate makes him essentially invincible from dying until the ultimate is over. And if he kills anybody while he's in the ultimate, he regains some health based on the amount of damage that he did while he was in his ultimate. So a lot of times with Chiron, you think you can kill him, and then he ults right before you kill him and gets a kill, and then he comes back to life, and then he kills you too because he does so much damage, and you're just like, what the heck? So yeah, that's Chiron. Izanami. Izanami is kind of fits in all three of these categories because she's a hard carry because she has an auto attack stim that hits really hard in the late game. She's an ability-based hunter because she has really, really good clear. Her 2 ability is really good for clear, and also her auto attacks are like AoE auto attacks, so they clear really well in the early game. But she's not really that good at either of those roles, so I'm going to put her in the defensive role because she has a dash that also makes her, or a teleport rather, that makes her invisible. So what else do you need to say? It's almost impossible to kill this chick if she doesn't waste her invisibility on something stupid. It's like trying to kill Loki. You just can't do it. And then she also has an ultimate that silences people. So again, it's just another defensive option for her that just makes it hard to kill her. And the last one is Jingwei. Jingwei is so frustrating for a couple reasons. One, she does a really, really high amount of damage. Two, her mobility is insane, and this is what gives her this defensive quality. One of the things that she can do is she has this dash, her 3, that when she's knocked up, she can dash out of that knock. It's like in midair, she can sort of dash in the direction that she's looking. So this means that she's a hard counter to people like Bacchus or Geb or anybody with a knock of a Wheelix or something like, well, kind of a Wheelix, not really a Wheelix, but anybody else with a knockup basically. They think that she's like crowd controlled in place, and then she just turns around and dashes away in midair. And especially Sobek. Sobek's big thing is that he can go and find a squishy character and pluck them out of position right into the middle of your team, right? Well, if Jingwei gets plucked, she just turns around and flies away. So you literally can't do anything to her. So that's one issue. Another issue is that she has her own knockups that can interrupt somebody that's trying to dive on top of her and kill her. And she has her ultimate, which takes about 0.0001 seconds to get off the ground. And then she flies up into the air for kind of a short distance, and then when she comes down to land, she flies another distance, and she's crowd control immune when she's channeling this ability for that really short time that it takes for her to get off the ground because it's so fast. So if she's really caught out of position, you try to dive her, she'll just ult away and then dash away, and you're just not catching up to her. So again, she's one of those characters that can be out of position and really not be in trouble, kind of like Apollo. So it's really hard to kill her. And I think that is it. Yes, it is. All right. So that concludes my guide to the Hunter role, as well as my Intro to Conquest series. If you guys have any comments or questions, just let me know in the comments. If you like the video, let me know. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. If there's any other videos that you want to see, if there are other kinds of guides that you want to see, or just any video or whatever, just let me know. I'll make that happen. And as always, most importantly, check out my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/steelorange3398. That's where I'm filming this right now. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks, guys.